Welcome back to Mainstage 3 for music educators. Um, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the layout mode, and we're going to talk about the channel strips, that's the mixer, and then we're going to be talking about routing and sends. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So here's our directory, 3 to 5, layout mode, 6 to 8, overview of the channel strips, 9 10, routing and sends, 11 12 to do dash practice. So that is just really stuff that you can do to get slightly better. So before we go into the layout mode, here's our concert again. So remember that we have our bottom here. We have the classic electric piano. And then up here, we have our fingerstyle bass. So we're going to add on to that a little more with this episode. So back to the slideshow. Layout mode. So layout mode, as we said before, that is this area. So layout mode, this is where incoming MIDI essentially gets mapped to controls and where you control the physical look of the concert. So that's where, that workspace comes in handy. So next we're going to be looking at, mapping. So let's go ahead and click on that right there and go back to our concert. So hardware input. That is the path from the MIDI controller to the Mainstage control. So that is this section right here. As I put it in the slide, sine is your friend. If you don't know what that is, last episode, we assigned it. So, which was doing that. So, I could do that if I wanted. So where this doesn't work anymore, and maybe this is the electric piano. Obviously, I don't want to do that. That's a sine. A sine is your friend. It makes your life so much easier. I suggest using it. But essentially, sine, what it does is maps the last received MIDI data to the control selected. That's what it does. So let me show you really quick again. So if I press it and I have a sine, so let's say I press this one, it'll detect that I pressed this and then it'll route to that channel and that MIDI port. Now if I press this one, it's different instruments. So channel 1 of the MPK Mini. If I press down here, port 1, Yamaha UX16. This one up here. And then it's a little different too, because this one has a lot more controls. So these drum pads are channel 10. So we can change that on here. So here's a little tip for you guys. So right now, I have the MPK Mini, right? This keyboard is channel 1. However, this top part is channel 10. This is the drum pads. Now, if you notice, if we look up here, we're getting MIDI input, which I didn't explain that. That's essentially just shows you, oh, we have MIDI input coming in. Really easy to understand, essentially. But if you notice, this channel 10, it's not working. But go to channel 10, now it is. So this is a good way to separate them. Because if you have it set to that, then this will trigger it, while this will also trigger it. You can see where that can be a problem. I want this to maybe be its own separate instrument. So we can easily do that by setting it to here. Same thing with the knobs. So moving back to the PowerPoint. Everything else is just kind of for aesthetics, So let's kind of screw around here. So learn is kind of like the assign button, but it's kind of for a different purpose. So I want to maybe make this look like this, have the correct amount of keys. So obviously the small one is not 61 keys. Let's start with that small one. So let's learn the smallest key. So we can learn it. It is C2. And it does that. I haven't figured out why it does that. Just because it does. You can easily like get rid of that by doing that. But so this is a 25 key, I think, if I'm correct. It may, yep, 25 key. So now that you can see, change this. You can see now that we have that. Now, obviously, it's different if I press the octave button, then that's that, but that's on the keyboard itself. So something to be wary of. But now it's mapped to look like that. And so this that I was messing with, it's essentially replicates what it would look like if you had like three instruments on layered on top of each other on that keyboard. So that being said, now we can go down here. So that being said, let's go down to this bottom one now and edit it. So obviously our low note is working here. High note's up there. So just happened to be it worked that way and it worked perfectly. So, but let's say maybe I only want to have it at 2. Or, I'll keep it at 3. So maybe we'll put that much. That's what it does. Simple as that. We can rename them. All that. Just aesthetics, really. So moving on from layout mode. Layout mode is probably the easiest mode out of them all. MIDI. This is like a little segue. This is what MIDI is. MIDI, if you ever hear me talk about it, stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. Essentially designed by representatives from Yamaha, Roland, Korg, Hawaii, and Sequential Circuits. So they all came together and designed this. So, like a Roland would work with a Yamaha and so forth. Very, very useful thing. Before we move on, you don't know, this is a pretty old keyboard. I've had this for probably about 5 years, 6 years now. But on the back of here, right here specifically, it's got a MIDI. So you can see right here, this is the MIDI, the 5-pin MIDI. You have the 5 pins and it goes in keyboard, or you can send it out from Mainstage into the keyboard. It's just kind of cool. But essentially, it grabs the data from here and puts it into the top. The smaller one runs on a USB one, which is another way of doing MIDI, but it's a newer form. It was around back then. So, anyways, moving on. So, next we have the channel strips and mixer. So, we're going to be talking about really the channel strips and the mixer at this point. So, overview really quick. We have the mute and solo down at this bottom. We have the volume fader, which obviously controls the volume. We have the pan that controls the pan, which is right above that. The output, where we can set the outputs of where the audio is. Sends, we're going to be talking about this later, but a sends essentially send audio to another location without changing the main output. So it kind of branches it off if you like to think of it like a tree. Audio effects is essentially, compressor, tape delay, channel EQ, reverb, that kind of stuff. Audio effects. Exactly as it seems. Continued on. So MIDI effects, you can't really see it. They didn't label it on this for some reason. I ripped this straight from Apple's manual on Mainstage. So, right above where it says sampler, which is the instrument plugin, which we'll talk about much later, is essentially the MIDI effects. So that little space up there. So you can see it there. Let me show you on here really quick. Here's MIDI effects right here, right above this. Right above sampler, or ePiano, whatever is an input. Don't know why they didn't fill that in. I haven't noticed that until now. Right above that is EQ. EQ is the equalizer for the channel strips. It also occupies an audio effects slot. So if you enable it, it will also be in the audio effects. Gain reduction is the compressor for the channel strip that is above the EQ. It also occupies, if you toggle it, a audio effect slot, which you have, from what I know, a decent chunk of those. So you won't run out most of the time. Expression, that's just really controls the channel's expression. You can kind of experiment what you want expression to do. Very useful. Each one has its own purpose. So moving on, let's go ahead and talk about routing and sends. Routing and sends is essentially this section is mainly for audio, sending audio out. This is the first specific, section that we go that isn't really an overview as much as it is just explaining what it is. So here we go. Essentially, we have the routing and sends. This is where the audio is going. Default audio output routing is for instrument and audio channels is to output 1 and 2. So that's the same. So let me show you an example of that. So as you can see right here, output, this is the default, literally defaults to audio output 1 and 2. So does the aux channels. I didn't put that there. The aux channels do it as well. So sends branches the audio out, perfect for sending to an aux channel with effects on it like reverb or something like that. So we can see that like whenever you spawn in some of these, they come with it. So here is an example of it. So whenever I play this big one, it goes here. It sends it out to here. You can see right here. It also sends a small amount to both of these. However, since this is lowered down here, so let me show you really quick. So sending a little bit to the large one, we can adjust that a little. If you notice, but the bass isn't adjusted by that. So that's one way you can use them. We can also, if we set it off, it won't go in there. And we can obviously go here and do it there. So, set it to the small chamber for the bass. Most of the time, I don't use that as much. I will just put it on the audio effects channel because I don't use it enough to warrant me creating a aux channel for that. So output essentially is where all the audio goes. We just talked about that. Output is right here. So here's an example for you. Steinway piano. So this is like default thing. So as you can see on the right, we have the Steinway piano. So Steinway piano, you play it. So it essentially branches out to the small one and large one. And then it goes to output 1, 2. And then output 1, 2 sends it master, and master goes to, your speakers. But essentially, you notice there, the large one is the only one sending. The small one has nothing on that side little toggle, which we can see over here, is this part. So since that's not there, then small isn't sending anything, but the large is sending some over to the large aux channel. So something to keep in mind. So here's a little to-do and practice. So using a concert we made last time, create an aux channel and L channel strips. So let's go ahead and do that. We have our plastic electric piano fingerstyle bass. I'm going to actually go ahead and delete these two. I have to go up here to the concert level and do it to be really effective. So there we go. Get rid of these buses. And let's go ahead. It says what? Using concert we made last time, create an aux channel in the channel strips. That's an easy one. Go up here, create an aux channel. Let's go ahead and make it bus 1. Bus 1 is essentially just, where we send it to get there. Let's just create one. And we're going to call this reverb. We're going to call it reverb. We're going to call it reverb. So now we're going to add an effect to it. So let's add, oh, whoops. So next thing to do is we add effect to it. Let's go ahead and add reverb to it since we call it reverb. So let's go ahead and pick chromaverb. I use that one quite a lot. So obviously we're playing and it's not coming through. So now we have to route it to it. So the next thing is we need to create a send from the instrument to the aux channel. So obviously this is the output. We don't want to change that right now. In the future we will, but for right now we don't. So let's make this little bus. So let's looking in here. Oh, bus 1, reverb. That's it right there. So now when I play it, notice it's still not working. This is because this little part down here is toggled all the way down. So we need to just slightly increase it. And there you go. Now we have a working one. Compared to, and I can just press this and I can shut it off. Compared to this. Oop, finger slip there. And we can send even more to it if we wanted. So, that being said, that's just kind of effects there. That was an easy one. So we can experiment with sends. So we can do that. Maybe I want to create another one. Let's create another aux channel with bus 2. So, like I said, buses are just another way of telling it where to send. Set this one to, maybe let's put fuzz. Go to here, amps pedal. Let's go to pedal board. Just put that. This is going to be a very interesting sound. So if you don't know what I just did, this is pedal board. We won't be talking about this in this series, but essentially this is just guitar pedals. So a lot of fun you can do with these. I use them sometimes for indoor shows, but obviously I don't want to send the classic piano, electric piano to the fuzz pedal, but I kind of want to send the bass guitar to the fuzz pedal. So, oh, didn't work. Sometimes it takes a hot minute. Hello, why are you? Oh, there we go. So here's it normal. That's it. Affected. Normal. Affected. So, and we can even do a little more. So going down here, we can add it to reverb as well. So now it comes out. And, I can set this one as well. So this comes into reverb. This comes both into fuzz and reverb. That's pretty loud. Sorry about that. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. So now back to this. Now let's experiment with this. I can now set the output to a bus and I can set it to that. So instead of going directly from classic piano to output 1, 2, it's now going to go from essentially the classic piano to the reverb, and that's going to send the 1, 2 and master. So no matter what, all of its signal is getting reverb on it. So there's something that you can experiment. So this is something I would do. I would, maybe synth 1. And essentially synth 1, I can now change synth 1. And, maybe this is synth 2, and I can edit synth 2. So that's something that you can do. That's something I do a lot. That being said, that's kind of the end of this episode. Hopefully that was helpful. As always, if you need to contact me, elliottbuell@gmail.com, 2L's, 2T's, BUEHL. If you have any questions, just forward them there, and we'll be going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.